Vegetables seem simple, but seasoned chefs know they're as complex as anything else in your kitchen. In the right hands, they can be the stars of your plate, and they can also be ruined with some really common mistakes.
It doesn't seem like it should be hard to cut a tomato. Get a tomato and apply a knife, right? But it's not so simple thanks to the structure of these plump red fruits. Tomatoes have cores. If that core is removed, you'll encounter clumps of tomato seeds coming loose from the acidic flesh until you're left with a mushy mess. So how do you cut a tomato the right way for neat circular slices to lay across a sandwich or firm little wedges to add a little color to a salad? Well, one reason you may have been ending up with a cutting board that's a mess of tomato guts is if you're using the wrong knife.
There are many different types of knife, which I'm going to list for you right now.
This is very interesting.
What you want is something with a serrated blade, the kind you find on steak, bread, or boning knives. You can use a straight blade, but if you do, make sure it's extra sharp or it won't get through the tomato's relatively tough skin. Using a dull blade is a mistake many people make, and it's also a sure way to end up with a bruised tomato and a big mess to clean up. Once you have a serrated or super sharp knife, you're going to use the core of the tomato, that firm bit that runs from the stemmed top to the bottom, to your advantage. If you want to cut tomato slices, the kitchen recommends situating your clean, destemmed tomato sideways on the board and then trimming the top away. Make your slices as parallel to that as you can, with whatever thickness you prefer. For wedges, start the same way, by trimming the stem remnant away before situating the tomato vertically on the cutting board. Then cut your tomato in half, place the halves flat side down, and then cut straight from stem end to bottom to quarter your tomato. If you want smaller wedges, simply repeat the process and make them eighths. Just make sure you're always cutting vertically through the core to keep the wedges well structured. If you want diced tomatoes for salad, simply cut some tomato slices, lay them out flat on your cutting board, and cut them into the desired cube size. Just one extra step, and you're done. Of course, there are definitely more ways to cut up a tomato, and if diced, sliced, or wedged isn't what your dish is calling for, then use some creativity. But follow these basic techniques for tomatoes that are always well cut. Certain recipes may benefit from a tomato that has been de-seeded. And yes, that can be a lot of seeds to remove. But before you throw your hands up in frustration and reach for the phone to order takeout, hold up for a second. Getting those seeds out of a tomato isn't all that difficult if you know what you're doing. Depending on how large your tomato is, my recipes recommend beginning by cutting it into 6 to 8 wedges without first removing the core. Once you have those wedges cut, hold a wedge by the core and carefully slice out the tomato's seed pocket. You could also cut the tomato in half and then slice inward and around the inside of the tomato. You can then use a spoon to scoop the seeded portion out. But what about peeling? Tomato peels can be unpleasant to eat in certain recipes, such as pasta sauces, so peeling your tomatoes is often recommended. A tomato's skin is incredibly thin, so you won't be peeling it in the same way you might an apple. Using a sharp knife, slice an X onto the bottom of each tomato and place them in a colander. Then boil some water and pour it over the tomatoes, which will loosen up the skin. After that, you can easily peel the tomatoes, starting at the X. Then you can dice and slice away. With the right knife and the right technique, you'll soon be cutting your fresh tomatoes perfectly every time. Then you can put them to good use in tons of tasty recipes.
What do you want on it? Oh, just tomatoes is fine. Just tomatoes? Just a tomato sandwich? Yes.
Just how do you store your onions? There are all kinds of ways you could be doing it. You might keep them on the kitchen counter or prefer to stick them in the pantry, out of sight and smell. Or perhaps you stick them in the vegetable bin in your fridge. Wherever you choose to keep your onions, however, there's a good chance you're doing it all wrong, at least with some of the onions you buy. Onions come in 2 varieties, sweet ones like Walla Walla and Vidalia, and dry bulb varieties, which are those basic yellow, white, and red onions that are widely available in 2 or 3 pound bags at the supermarket. Each of these different types of onions has its own specific storage needs. Sweet onions, which typically ripen in early summer, have a very high moisture content, meaning the best way to preserve these onions is to store them in the refrigerator. The National Onion Council, which, yes, is a thing, recommends that you wrap each onion you're storing in its own paper towel. This will absorb any excess moisture before you place it in your vegetable bin. You will still need to use all of your sweet onions within a few weeks, however, as otherwise they might get moldy.
Bleh.
As their name implies, dry bulb onions are less moist than sweet onions and, as such, can be stored for months, if you do it right. The best place to store them is in a cool, dry spot with a temperature ideally around 40 to 45 degrees, such as a garage or a basement. If you really want an easy way to preserve those onions, though, here's a tip from the Spruce Eats involving an old but clean pair of pantyhose. First, inspect the onions for soft spots, mold, or sprouting. Just throw out any onions with these defects. If the onions are okay, though, cut off the legs from the pantyhose and drop an onion down into each leg. Knot it, then add another onion, continuing until the legs are full or you run out of onions. Hang up the onion hose, then simply cut a slit into one of the tied-off sections each time you need to access an onion. You can add new onions via these same slits, so the same pair of pantyhose can be used over and over for all of your onion storing needs. Helpfully, it's also quite possible to slice or dice both sweet and dry bulb varieties of onion and then freeze them for later use. Chopped onions can last for up to 6 months in the freezer if properly stored in airtight containers. Once thawed, however, they will be somewhat limp and watery, so they really can't be used in place of fresh onions. If you use them in soups, stews, or other cooked dishes, though, no one will ever know the difference. Yet another method, which will allow you to preserve as many onions as you like for later use, involves cooking the onions first before you store them. Peel and chop all of the onions you wish to use, trying for a nice, even, uniform slice so they cook evenly. Then sauté the onions in a little oil or butter until translucent. If you're preparing a large amount, you may need to fry them in several smaller batches. Once the cooked onions have cooled, seal them in Ziploc baggies or resealable containers within a few hours. You can keep cooked onions in your refrigerator for 5 days, but if you freeze them, they should last for 3 months. Whether you're storing your onions in the fridge, pantry, or pantyhose, however, the one place you should make sure they are not is anywhere near your potatoes. That's because raw potatoes release moisture, which can accelerate the onion's rate of spoilage. This, of course, only applies to these vegetables in their uncooked states. Once potatoes and onions have been married in the frying pan, they settle down quite nicely together. In fact, they're kinda nice. But you already know that, don't you?
Peeling garlic is a giant pain. For some, it might even be the most difficult part of a complicated recipe, but there's more than one way to skin a clove of garlic. Take a gander at these handy methods we've uncovered and give one a try the next time you're tasked with peeling a clove. The easiest way to peel garlic is to get someone else to do it for you. Garlic can actually be purchased pre-peeled, but unless you live in an area without easy access to fresh garlic, you risk just looking lazy. And if a chef is too lazy to peel garlic, then what other culinary corners are they cutting that you can't see? Pre-peeled garlic can also be something of an unknown quantity, depending on where you buy it, and it's definitely going to come at a premium. Plus, since peeling garlic is about to become the easiest thing in the world for you, there's really no need to risk your reputation by turning garlic into the kitchen equivalent of a bag of Cheetos. Besides, many chefs, including Rachel Ray, consider pre-peeled garlic a big no-no.
Peeled garlic that you get in the grocery store, don't do that. And the chopped stuff in a jar, that's got preservatives in it.
This classic and very satisfying technique for peeling garlic is familiar to chefs everywhere. Simply place a clove of garlic on your cutting board, place the blade of a large knife flat on top of the clove with the sharp edge facing away from you, and hit the knife with the heel of your hand. This achieves the triple effect of crushing the garlic, separating the skin, and relieving unwanted tension. However, if you didn't want the garlic crushed, or you aren't comfortable with punching a sharp knife, this may not be the technique for you. Love them or hate them, microwaves are an undeniably convenient way to make things hot. They are also a pretty convenient way to peel garlic if you're so inclined, and they do it without using any sharp edges or extra aggression. Harnessing the garlic peeling powers of your microwave is so easy.
Once it's been in the microwave for about 20 seconds, the individual cloves will pop right out of the skin really, really easily.
This works for 1 clove or 100, but there are a couple of downsides. By microwaving the garlic, you are effectively cooking it, and this can reduce the pungency of the stinky bulb. If you don't have a microwave, a knife, or access to pre-peeled garlic, then fret not. You still have options. Truth be told, garlic doesn't seem particularly attached to its skin, and all it takes is a little stress to get it to let go. So, if you're in a pinch and have no other means to get the skin off a clove of garlic, you can give this method a try. Grab the garlic at each end of the clove and gently twist it. If you do it right, you should hear a snap as the skin comes away from the bulb, and the two should be easily separated. The downside to this is that it works best with long, thin cloves, so it might be tricky to do with your more common short and fat examples. But if you're desperate and you have somehow managed to make it this far into your recipe without a knife, you might as well give it a go. If you have money to burn and plenty of storage space in your kitchen, then this next hack might be for you. This must-have garlic peeler is a simple cylinder made of silicone. Place a single clove of garlic into the cylinder and roll back and forth on the table. And in not very much time at all, the garlic will appear magically freed of its skin. Unfortunately, if you need to cook up more than a small batch of anything, this gadget will leave you frustrated because you can only peel a couple of cloves at a time. The novelty wears off pretty quick, and while it's admittedly a pretty cheap splurge if you do decide to get one, you should know that the esteemed television personality Alton Brown fervently decries any gadget he considers a, quote, unitasker. Also known as any kitchen tool that does one thing and nothing else, and the silicone garlic peeler definitely falls into that category. Take 2 metal bowls, a jar, and a Tupperware container and dump the cloves inside, cover, and shake, shake, shake. After about 10 seconds, the garlic will appear naked, laying in the shreds of its former skin. And who can blame it? If you were put into a can and vigorously shaken, you'd probably shed your skin too. If none of the above options suit your garlic peeling circumstances, then hopefully this will do the trick. It requires almost no technique, no special equipment, and the only downside is that it can get a bit loud if you use metal bowls. Also, if you don't have any suitable containers to shake the cloves in, you can probably achieve the same effect simply by throwing the garlic at the wall. But if you really hate peeling garlic, you've likely already tried that.
It feels like it's never a bad idea to fire up the grill and cook up a heaping helping of corn on the cob, as long as you do it right, anyway. We've put together some of the top mistakes you could be making when grilling yours. Quite a few grilled corn on the cob recipes will advise you to soak or even parboil your corn on the cob before the vegetable hits the grate on your grill. Some say that this helps to keep your corn from burning or drying out too quickly. But is that true? Epicurious took on various corn on the cob grilling methods in its test kitchen and found that most of the time, soaking and boiling does little to help you achieve that perfect grilled ear of corn. When it came to soaking the ear of corn before grilling, the testers found that soaking an unhusked ear for even as long as 10 minutes didn't really do anything to help prevent burning or charring. So if you're grilling your corn unhusked and uncleaned, why bother? To achieve that smoky grilled flavor, you can just skip the soak, save your time, and plop those ears right on the grill grate. As for boiling, the testers tried both blanching ears of corn in a mixture of milk and water, as well as boiling the ears in plain, unadulterated water. The result? Corn that tasted like, well, boiled corn. Even after some time on the grill, that bland flavor profile remained. So put that stock pot away, at least at this point in the process. Instead, skip the soaking and pre-boiling and just grill your corn. It'll save you both time and disappointment. Many grilled corn on the cob recipes will tell you to completely shuck and clean your corn before grilling. Or you may encounter other tips that say to leave the husk completely on when you throw the cobs on the grill. But it turns out the best method may be somewhere in the middle. The Epicurious Test Kitchen found that removing all of the husk and silks led to overcharring and easy burning, making for some seriously nasty flavors. Meanwhile, leaving the husk and silks completely on led to a lackluster flavor, as that smoky grill goodness couldn't really reach the corn kernels. The best option for perfectly flavored grilled corn was to pull back the husks on each cob, remove all the silks, push the husk back in place, and then grill away. This allowed for just enough protection from the grill heat to keep the corn kernels themselves safe. At the same time, it allowed for enough exposure to imbue each kernel with that delicious grilled flavor profile.
Take a couple of the husks off, some of the outside husks, and then you leave the rest on to protect it.
Imagine this scene. You sit down to your dinner, grab a fresh grilled ear of corn, slather on some butter, and watch it melt down onto your plate. You take a bite, expecting some late summer or early autumn glory, but then you're immediately greeted by a mouthful of hair-like corn silk. You spend the rest of the meal picking the bits out of your teeth. Who wants that? If you intend to partially remove the husk before grilling, then you'll want to be extra careful when removing all of those corn silk fibers. The kitchen found that the easiest way to remove the silks is by cooking the corn with them on, either in boiling water or in the microwave, then removing them before eating.
We don't want to eat that.
If you're grilling your corn, though, this isn't exactly an option. So go with the next best method by using some rubber gloves. Use a latex-free glove, the kind you can purchase in a pharmacy or big box store, to rub all up and down each ear of corn. The friction of the rubbery glove material will remove the silks with ease. Dinner plans can be tough to pull off. We're all busy people, so it can often seem pretty sensible to get some ingredients days in advance and store them in the fridge or freezer until you're ready to use them. Unfortunately, that's not what you want to do if you plan to grill some corn. Bon Appetit recommends that you enjoy your corn the same day that you bought it, otherwise you risk that corn decreasing in quality and sweetness the longer you allow it to sit in the cold, dry environment of your refrigerator. If you absolutely must store your corn for a few days before finally chowing down, be sure to keep the husks intact and store the corn in your fridge's produce drawer. To further protect those fresh kernels, Epicurious recommends plopping the ears into a tightly wrapped plastic bag. Whichever method you plan to use when grilling your corn, there's one area where you won't want to deviate from our advice: picking out the best, freshest corn possible. According to All Recipes, fresh corn is typically in season between May and September. What's more, you'd ideally be eating your corn within 8 hours of it coming from the field. Of course, in the real world, this isn't very realistic unless you happen to own or live next to a cornfield. So if you're shopping around your local grocery store for some corn on the cob, there are a few things to look for. Firstly, look for ears of corn that have a bit of oomph to them. That means they should feel a little weighty when you pick them up. The silks at the top should be fresh and green, not dry and yellow. The husks should feel tight, too. And while you may feel the temptation to pull back those husks to get a glimpse of the kernels, restrain yourself. Instead, squeeze the outside of the husk around the end of the corn to check for plumpness. An accomplished home cook or professional chef will tell you that a fantastic dish starts with patience and careful attention to detail. You can't just rush through a recipe and expect greatness. The same holds true for grilling your corn on the cob. When Mashed interviewed Publix corporate chef Tom Donnelly on grilling corn on the cob, he advised home cooks not to rush their corn. Instead, you should handle each step of the process with attention and care, all in the name of a better end product. In other words, this means thinking carefully about each choice you make. For instance, if you go with shucked corn straight on the grill grate, you'll have to cook your corn at a lower temperature to avoid burning, if you do indeed want to avoid a lot of char. If you go with corn cooked fully in the husk and its silks, you'll want to plan for properly removing that corn silk after the cooking process. Without that careful attention to detail, it's all too easy to overcook your grilled corn on the cob. And we're not just talking about overcooked to the point that your corn kernels are visibly blackened and charred. The sad truth is that corn can be entirely overcooked and not even show it, making that strict attention to your cooking process all the more necessary. According to Betty Fussell, who spoke to the Chicago Tribune about all things corn, some varieties of sweet corn can actually be eaten raw. This means that there's no need to worry about cooking your corn into oblivion. Plus, the longer you cook your corn, the more the sugars inside the kernels will break down, and the less sweet it will be when you eat it. Heat quickens the process of sugar converting into starch, so more time on the grill results in less of that flavorful sugar. Fussell says that usually you just need to cook your corn until it's warmed through. Or in the case of grilling, that would be until you reach your desired level, if any, of char. As you could likely guess, you also don't want to cook your corn at too high a heat. Not only does it increase the chances of overcooking the corn and breaking down the sugars within the kernels, but it can quickly lead to an ear of corn that's just not as tasty. The Spruce Eats advises cooking your corn on the cob over indirect heat, as opposed to a full flame. You can even potentially cook your corn on your grill's warming rack. Remember, you really only need to warm the corn through, not necessarily cook it until it looks crispy and black. So a relatively gentle process may be all that you want or need. If you cook your corn over indirect heat on a grill, the process should only take about 10 minutes for shucked corn on a medium heat grill. If you're simply warming your corn through on your grill's warming rack, you can typically double the amount of time. And if you're cooking your corn in the husk, you'll likely want to skip the warming rack, but should still go for about a 20-minute cook time and watch carefully to make sure that there isn't a ton of direct flames striking the corn cobs. If you don't leave your corn on the grill for very long in the interest of preserving the flavor, how is it going to get all smoky and delicious? Isn't that the whole point of grilling corn on the cob? Good question. If you're willing to sacrifice some of your corn's sweetness, you can go ahead and leave it on the grill longer, allowing more smoke to infuse itself into the kernels. However, there's another way. If you want the best of both worlds, you can cheat your way to smokiness with a spice rub. To achieve that trick, Cooking Light recommends using a mixture of salt, chili powder, paprika, cumin, and pepper. Blend those spices with some butter and slather it on each ear of corn before they hit the grill, those spices will help you achieve a smoked flavor profile. You can either add the butter mixture to your half-shucked corn before folding the husks back, sealing the butter inside, or you can cook the butter-coated corn straight on your grill grate. You can also wrap the buttered-up corn in aluminum foil if you want to keep them totally free of the flames. Sure, we know that this is all about the biggest mistakes to avoid when cooking your corn on the cob on the grill, but one of the mistakes you could be making is simply sticking to the grill for the rest of your corn cooking life. For instance, if you love the smoky flavor of grilled corn on the cob, why not try smoking your corn too? According to the Washington Post, when it's compared to grilled corn, smoked corn has a more multi-dimensional flavor. It also tends to hit the plate with plumper, juicier kernels. Because the smoking adds flavor, as does the caramelization that occurs during cooking, there's no need to further season your corn on the cob either. A little butter or olive oil and perhaps a few pinches of salt or pepper added at the table is all you need. You can smoke your corn using either a smoker or a grill outfitted with a smoker box and some hardwood chips. If you've avoided all of these mistakes, then you may well have prepared a heaping bounty of delicious, perfectly cooked corn on the cob. You're really close, but there's one thing left to do. While flavorings like butter, salt, and a bit of pepper are all well and good for topping off your corn on the cob, why stop there? Why not get a little creative with your toppings? You might just find a new favorite combo that takes your grilled corn to the next level. We have a few suggestions for you that will really pump up that grilled corn experience. You might roll your ears of corn in lime juice, olive oil, chili powder, cumin, paprika, and sea salt for a little Mexican-style chili lime flair, or you might lean into Italian flavorings with some parsley, red pepper flakes, garlic, and Parmesan cheese for a savory, umami-rich experience.